The ship landed on the platform with a deep rumble that Danny Cole felt in his chest. He stood near the window and looked out at the massive academy that stretched across the rocky moon. Towers of black metal rose into the purple sky. Lights blinked from 1,000 windows. Ships of every shape and size moved through the air like insects around a hive. Danny was 23 years old. He had brown hair, tired eyes, and hands that knew hard work. He came from New Montana, a small human colony on the edge of known space. His people were farmers and miners. They were not warriors. They were not explorers. They were simple folk who lived simple lives. But Danny had always wanted more. The Galactic Coalition Academy accepted only the best candidates from across 100 worlds. It trained them to become wardens, elite operatives who protected frontier colonies and explored dangerous zones where no one else dared to go. Thousands applied each cycle. Only a few hundred were chosen. Danny was one of 3 humans ever accepted into the program. He grabbed his bag and walked down the ramp into the arrival hall. The air smelled strange, like metal and something sweet he could not name. Beings of every kind moved around him. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others were short and had too many arms. A few floated instead of walked. Danny had seen aliens before, but never so many in one place. A loud voice called for all new cadets to gather in the central plaza. Danny followed the crowd through wide corridors until he reached an open space beneath a dome of clear glass. Stars shone above them like scattered diamonds. At the front of the plaza stood a platform. On the platform stood the largest creature Danny had ever seen. Commander Varix was a Kethra, a species of reptilian warriors known throughout the galaxy for their strength and discipline. She stood nearly 8 feet tall. Her scales were dark green, almost black. Her eyes were yellow with vertical slits. When she spoke, her voice echoed off the walls like thunder. "You are here because you believe you are worthy," she said. "You are wrong. You are nothing. You are soft, untested, and weak. The Academy will break you. It will crush everything you think you know. And if you survive, if you endure, then perhaps you will become something useful." Danny stood in the crowd and listened. He did not feel afraid. He had heard worse from the foreman back home when the harvest was bad. Commander Varix explained the first trial. It was called the bonding ceremony. Every warden operated with a companion, a hunter pup, bred from the deadliest predators of a dozen worlds. These creatures were smart, loyal, and dangerous. They chose their partners through instinct. A pup that bonded with a cadet would stay with them for life. The cadets were led to a massive hall filled with cages. Inside each cage was a hunter pup. Some were huge, with muscles that rippled under thick fur. Others were lean and fast, built for speed. A few had scales instead of fur. Their eyes glowed in the dim light. One by one, the cadets entered the hall. The cages opened. The pups moved freely, sniffing the air, studying the candidates. When a pup found its match, it would sit at the cadet's feet and refuse to move. Danny watched as a Torvaki warrior, a massive creature named Krath with 4 arms and tusks like a boar, was chosen by the largest pup in the hall. The beast was nearly as big as a horse, with black fur and red eyes. It pressed its head against Krath's leg, and the warrior grinned with pride. A Velith diplomat, a slender being with silver skin and large dark eyes, was chosen by a sleek pup that moved like water. They seemed to communicate without words, understanding each other instantly. Danny waited. An hour passed. No pup approached him. The other cadets began to notice. Whispers spread through the hall. A few pointed at the human standing alone in the middle of the room. Some laughed quietly. Others shook their heads with pity. Danny kept his face calm. He had learned patience on the farm. He had spent long nights waiting for storms to pass, for crops to grow, for sick animals to heal. Waiting was something he knew how to do. 2 hours passed. Commander Varix stepped forward. Her yellow eyes studied Danny with cold interest. In her hand, she held a data pad. If no pup chose a cadet, that cadet was marked as unbonded. Unbonded cadets were sent home. Their time at the academy was over before it began. Danny felt his heart beat faster. He had come so far. He had worked so hard. He could not fail now. Not like this. Then he heard a sound. It was soft. Almost too quiet to notice. A small scratching noise from the far corner of the hall, where the shadows were deepest. Danny turned and looked. A pup emerged from the darkness. It was small, barely half the size of the others. Its fur was pale, almost white, and patches of it were missing, revealing pink scars beneath. One of its eyes was clouded and blind. It walked with a limp, favoring its left front leg. The pup moved slowly across the hall. Every other creature watched in silence. Even the chosen pups turned their heads to see. The small pup stopped directly in front of Danny. It looked up at him with its one good eye. Then it sat down at his feet and did not move. Commander Varix checked her datapad. Her expression did not change, but something flickered in her yellow eyes. "That one is marked defective," she said. "It was scheduled for culling. It has never completed a single training exercise." Danny looked down at the pup. It was thin. He could see its ribs through its scarred skin, but it sat straight and proud, as if daring anyone to challenge its choice. "What is its name?" Danny asked. "It has no name. Defective units are not named." Danny knelt down. He moved slowly so he would not frighten the creature. He reached out his hand, and the pup sniffed his fingers. Then it pressed its head against his palm. "Her name is Scout," Danny said quietly. The hall was silent. The other cadets stared. Some with confusion, some with amusement, a few with something that might have been disgust. Commander Varix looked at the human and the scarred runt for a long moment. Then she made a note on her datapad and moved on. The bonding ceremony was complete. Danny stood up. Scout stood with him, staying close to his leg. Together, they walked out of the hall and into the corridor beyond. Behind them, the whispers grew louder. The human had bonded with a crippled runt. It was a joke. It was pathetic. It was proof that humans did not belong here. Danny did not look back. He kept walking, and Scout limped faithfully beside him. They had chosen each other. That was enough. The first week at the academy was hard. The second week was harder. By the third week, Danny understood what Commander Varix had meant when she said the academy would break them. Every morning began before dawn. The cadets ran through obstacle courses designed for species far stronger and faster than humans. They studied combat tactics, survival techniques, and alien languages until their minds ached. They trained with weapons that Danny had never seen before, blades that hummed with energy and rifles that fired bolts of pure light. Danny fell behind in almost every exercise. His body was not built for the same challenges as the Torvaki warriors or the Kethra soldiers. He could not lift what they lifted. He could not run as fast or jump as high. The instructors marked his scores in red, the color of failure, but Danny did not quit. He woke up earlier than the others. He stayed up later. He practiced when everyone else was sleeping, and every night, when he returned to his small room exhausted and aching, Scout was waiting for him. The little pup had her own struggles. The other hunter pups were strong and aggressive. They had been bred for power and speed. Scout was neither. In group training exercises, she was pushed aside, knocked down, and ignored. The handlers who supervised the pups shook their heads whenever they saw her. The mockery came from everywhere. Krath, the massive Torvaki warrior, was the worst. He found every opportunity to remind Danny of his failure. In the mess hall, he would walk past Danny's table and laugh at Scout, calling her the crippled rat. In the training yard, he would shove Danny aside and tell him to go home before he embarrassed himself further. "Your kind does not belong here," Krath said one day, his forearms crossed over his chest. "Humans are weak. Your little pet proves it. You should have chosen a real companion, not a piece of garbage from the reject pile." Danny said nothing. He had learned long ago that words were wasted on those who only wanted to hurt. He simply picked up his training gear and walked away, Scout limping at his side, but the words still stung. Late at night, when the academy was quiet and Scout was curled up at the foot of his bed, Danny wondered if Krath was right. Maybe he did not belong here. Maybe he had made a mistake. Then Scout would lift her head and look at him with her one good eye, and Danny would remember why he had come. He had come to prove that humans were more than what others believed. He had come to show the galaxy that strength was not only about muscles and speed. And he had come because Scout had chosen him when no one else would. He owed her everything. He would not let her down. Danny began to study Scout more carefully. He watched how she moved, how she reacted to different situations, how she solved problems. He noticed things that others missed. Scout was not stupid. She was not weak. She was careful. In the breeding pens, Scout had been the smallest of her litter. Her brothers and sisters had attacked her, bitten her, and left her with the scars she still carried. She had survived by learning to avoid conflict, to watch and wait, to strike only when the moment was right. She was a survivor. Just like Danny, he started training with her differently. Instead of trying to make her fight like the other pups, he worked with her natural instincts. He taught her signals, quiet gestures that told her when to move, when to hide, when to attack. She learned quickly, faster than he expected. In the combat simulations, Danny and Scout developed their own style. While other cadets charged forward with their powerful companions, Danny held back. He let his enemies tire themselves out. He watched for weaknesses. And when the moment came, he struck fast and hard. Scout was his eyes and ears. Her hearing was sharp, sharper than any of the other pups. She could detect movement from across a room. She could sense danger before it arrived. And because she was small and quiet, enemies often ignored her until it was too late. They lost more battles than they won. But slowly, their losses became fewer. Their victories became more frequent. The other cadets did not notice. They were too busy laughing at the human and his crippled runt to pay attention to what was actually happening. But Commander Varix noticed. She watched Danny from the observation platforms during training exercises. She reviewed his scores and his tactics. She saw how he adapted, how he learned from every failure, how he refused to give up no matter how many times he was knocked down. One evening, she called him to her office. Danny stood at attention while the massive Kethra sat behind her desk, her yellow eyes studying him like a predator studying prey. "Your scores are among the lowest in your class," she said. "Yes, Commander. Your companion is considered defective. Many instructors believe she should have been culled." Unacated. "Yes, Commander. And yet you continue. Why?" Danny was silent for a moment. He thought about his home, about his family, about the long nights on the farm when everything seemed hopeless. He thought about Scout, waiting for him back in his room. "Because giving up is not who I am," he said finally. "And Scout did not give up on me. I will not give up on her." Commander Varix said nothing. Her face showed no emotion. Then she dismissed him with a wave of her clawed hand. Danny returned to his room. Scout was waiting by the door, her tail wagging slowly. He knelt down and scratched behind her ears. "They think we are nothing," he whispered. "We are going to prove them wrong." The midterm evaluations were coming. Every cadet would face a solo survival trial in a simulated hostile environment. Those who failed would be expelled from the academy. Those who succeeded would move on to the final phase of training. The night before the trials, Danny could not sleep. He lay in his bed and stared at the ceiling while Scout rested beside him. He could hear his heart beating in the darkness. Tomorrow, everything would change. He did not know if he was ready. He did not know if Scout was ready. But he knew one thing for certain: they would face it together, and that was enough. The drop pod hit the ground hard enough to rattle Danny's teeth. Warning lights flashed red. Steam hissed from the vents. Then the door blew open, and the thick, wet air of the swamp rushed in. Danny climbed out of the pod with Scout pressed close against his leg. They stood on a small island of solid ground, surrounded by dark water. Strange trees with twisted roots rose from the swamp, their branches covered in moss that glowed faintly green. The sky above was hidden by fog so thick that Danny could not tell if it was day or night. This was the survival trial. 72 hours in a simulated hostile environment, Reach the extraction point or fail. No second chances. Danny checked his gear. He had a knife, a small medical kit, a water purifier, and 3 days of emergency rations. Nothing else. The academy wanted to see what cadets could do with almost nothing. He pulled out his tracker and studied the map. The extraction point was 30 kilometers north, through the heart of the swamp. The terrain was marked as extreme difficulty, the hardest biome in the entire simulation. Danny knew this was not an accident. Someone had assigned him here on purpose. Someone wanted to watch him fail. He took a deep breath and put the tracker away. It did not matter why he was here. It only mattered what he did next. "Come on, Scout," he said quietly. "Let's move." They started walking. The swamp was alive with danger. Within the first hour, Danny spotted 3 different types of predator constructs patrolling through the water. They were holographic simulations, but they could cause real pain. If a construct caught him, it would mark him as killed, and the trial would be over. The constructs were big and fast. Danny and Scout could not outrun them. They could not outfight them. So they did something else. They hid. Danny learned to read the swamp. He watched how the water moved, how the moss shifted in the wind, how the light changed as the constructs passed nearby. He found patterns. The predators followed routes. Like guards walking the same path over and over again. They were dangerous, but they were predictable. Scout was his early warning system. Her ears turned toward sounds that Danny could not hear. Her nose twitched at smells he could not detect. When danger was close, she would press against his leg and go still. When the path was clear, she would move forward and look back at him. Waiting. They moved slowly. They rested often. They never took unnecessary risks. The first night was the worst. Danny found a hollow space between the roots of a massive tree. He crawled inside with Scout and pulled branches over the entrance to hide them. The swamp grew darker and louder. Creatures screamed in the distance. The water bubbled and splashed as unseen things moved through it. Danny did not sleep. He held his knife in one hand and kept the other on Scout's back, feeling her breathe. Near midnight, a construct found their hiding spot. It was huge, a lizard-like creature with 6 legs and jaws wide enough to swallow Danny whole. It pushed its snout into the hollow space and sniffed. Danny could see its teeth, each one as long as his finger. He did not move. He did not breathe. Scout pressed herself flat against the ground. Her one good eye watched the creature without blinking. Seconds passed. They felt like hours. Then the construct pulled back. It had not detected them. It moved on. Crashing through the swamp toward easier prey, Danny let out a slow breath. His hands were shaking. Scout licked his fingers, and he almost laughed. "Good girl," he whispered. "Good girl." The second day was better. Danny had learned the rhythms of the swamp. He moved during the quiet hours, when the constructs rested. He crossed open water by floating on fallen logs, using his hands to paddle silently. He ate his rations in small bites to make them last. His shoulder wound from the first night's close call was healing. The medical kit had done its job. He would have a scar, but he would survive. Scout grew stronger too. The fear in her eyes began to fade. She walked with more confidence. Her limp less noticeable than before. She was adapting, just like Danny. On the morning of the 3rd day, they reached a ridge overlooking the extraction point. Danny crouched behind a rock and studied the area below. The extraction point was a small platform in the middle of a clearing. A beacon flashed blue, marking the finish line. Around the clearing, Danny could see at least 5 predator constructs waiting in the shadows. They were guarding the exit, waiting for cadets to rush in without thinking. Most cadets would charge forward. They would trust their strength and their companions to fight through the danger. Danny was not most cadets. He spent 2 hours watching the constructs. He mapped their movements. He counted the seconds between their patrols. He found the one moment, a gap of maybe 30 seconds, when the path to the platform was clear. Then he waited for that moment. When it came, he moved. He ran low and fast, Scout racing beside him. The ground was soft and slippery. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. 20 seconds. He was halfway there. 15 seconds. A construct turned its head. It saw movement. It started to move. 10 seconds. Danny pushed harder. Scout leaped ahead, reaching the platform first. Danny threw himself forward and slammed his hand onto the beacon. The light turned green. Trial complete. Danny lay on the platform, gasping for air. Scout stood over him, her tail wagging, her tongue hanging out. Around them, the construct stopped moving. The simulation recognized that he had won. He had finished the trial with 6 hours to spare. When the recovery team arrived to take him back to the academy, the officer in charge checked his results and looked at Danny with surprise. "Only 3 cadets finished ahead of you," the officer said. "All of them were placed in easier biomes. You were in the swamp." Danny nodded. He was too tired to speak. The officer looked at Scout, then back at Danny. Something changed in his expression. It was not respect, not exactly, but it was no longer dismissal. "Well done, human," he said quietly. Danny picked up Scout and carried her onto the transport. She rested her head on his shoulder and closed her eye. They had survived. They had proven something. And the final trial was still to come. The final examination was called the Crucible. Every cadet who survived the midterm trials had heard stories about it. Some said it was a combat test against impossible odds. Others said it was a puzzle that only the smartest minds could solve. A few whispered that it was something worse, something that broke cadets from the inside out. No one who finished the Crucible ever talked about what happened inside. Danny stood in line with the other surviving cadets, waiting for his turn. The line was shorter than it had been at the beginning of the cycle. Many had washed out during the survival trials. Others had quit. Only the strongest remained. Krath stood near the front, his massive arms crossed over his chest. His hunter pup, the beast they called Crusher, sat beside him like a mountain of black fur and muscle. Krath caught Danny's eye and smiled, showing his tusks. "Good luck, human," he said, his voice dripping with false kindness. "Try not to cry." Danny said nothing. Scout pressed against his leg, and he rested his hand on her head. One by one, the cadets entered the Crucible chamber. Some came out looking shaken. Others came out with tears on their faces. A few did not come out at all. They were escorted away by medical officers and never seen again. When Danny's name was called, he walked forward alone. Scout limped beside him, her one good eye fixed straight ahead. The chamber door was massive, made of metal so thick that no sound could pass through it. Above the door, a row of windows looked down from an observation gallery where the instructors watched. Danny could see Commander Varric standing at the center, her yellow eyes tracking his every move. The door opened. Danny and Scout stepped inside. The chamber was empty except for a single metal chair in the center of the room. The walls were blank white. The floor was smooth and cold. There was nothing else. No weapons. No obstacles. No enemies. Danny looked around, confused. Scout sniffed the air and whined softly. Then the lights went out. When they came back on, the room had changed. Danny was no longer standing in a chamber. He was standing in his home, on New Montana. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. Sunlight streamed through windows he recognized from his childhood. He could hear his mother's voice singing from the kitchen. He took a step forward, and the floor creaked beneath his feet. It felt real. It sounded real. Everything looked exactly as he remembered. His mother appeared in the doorway. She smiled at him, the same warm smile she had given him every morning before school. "Danny," she said, "you are home." He opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, the scene changed. Fire. The house was burning. The walls collapsed around him. His mother's scream echoed through the smoke. He tried to run toward her, but his legs would not move. He could only watch as the flames consumed everything he loved. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. "This is real," the voice said. "While you were training at the academy, your colony was attacked. Everyone you knew is dead. Your mother, your father, your sister. They burned while you played soldier on a distant moon. The images shifted again. Danny saw his father lying in the street, his body broken. He saw his little sister running from soldiers in black armor, her face twisted with fear. He saw his home reduced to ashes. You abandoned them, the voice continued. You left them to die. And now there is nothing left. You are alone. Danny fell to his knees. The weight of what he was seeing crushed him like a stone on his chest. His hands shook. His vision blurred with tears. This was the crucible. This was the test that broke minds and shattered spirits. It found your deepest fear, your greatest weakness, and it used it against you, like a weapon. Scout pressed her small body against Danny's side. She whined and licked his face. Her one good eye looked up at him. Full of worry, Danny looked at her. For a long moment, he did not move. The images of destruction continued to play around him. His family screamed. His world burned. Then Danny sat down in the metal chair. He pulled Scout onto his lap and held her close. She rested her head on his arm, her scarred body warm against his chest. I do not know if this is real, Danny said quietly. His voice was steady, even though tears rolled down his cheeks. Maybe it is. Maybe everything I love is gone. He stroked Scout's pale fur. But if it is real, then I will grieve later. Right now, my job is to finish this test. My job is to become what I came here to be. That is how I honor them. That is what they would want. He looked up at the burning images around him. You cannot break me, he said. I have already accepted the worst thing that could happen. And I am still here. The voice did not respond. Danny turned his attention to Scout. He began to speak softly, telling her stories about his home. He told her about his mother's cooking, how she made the best bread in the whole colony. He told her about his father's bad jokes, the ones that made everyone groan but also laugh. He told her about his sister, who dreamed of flying ships across the galaxy. He spoke calmly, peacefully, as if the nightmare around him did not exist. The holograms flickered. They tried to change, to become more horrible, more painful. But Danny did not react. He simply held Scout and talked about the people he loved. In the observation gallery above, the instructors watched in stunned silence. They had seen Torvaki warriors go berserk under less pressure. They had seen Velith geniuses collapse into madness. No one had ever simply sat down and refused to break. Commander Varix stood at the center of the gallery. Her yellow eyes were fixed on the human in the chamber below. She watched him comfort his scarred little pup in the middle of a nightmare designed to destroy everything he was. And she grinned. She reached out to the control panel beside her and pressed a button. The observation gallery's windows went dark, sealing out the other instructors. Then she pressed another button, and the simulation inside the chamber stopped. The holograms vanished. The room returned to its original blank white state. Danny looked up, confused. Scout lifted her head. The chamber door opened, and Commander Varix stepped inside. She walked toward Danny and stopped a few feet away. Her towering form cast a shadow over him. The test is over, she said. Did I fail? Danny asked. Commander Varix looked at the human and the runt pup sitting together in the empty room. No, she said. You passed. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Danny sat there for a long moment, Scout still in his lap. Then he stood up, set her gently on the floor, and walked out of the crucible. He did not know what had just happened. He did not know why Commander Varix had ended the test early, but he knew one thing. He was still standing. And that was enough. The Great Hall of the Academy was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Cadets stood in formation at the center, their companions beside them. Instructors lined the walls. Dignitaries from a dozen worlds watched from elevated platforms, their eyes sharp with interest. This was the final ceremony. The rankings would be announced. Honors would be given. And some cadets would earn the title of Warden, the highest achievement the Academy could offer. Danny stood near the back of the formation with Scout at his feet. His uniform was clean and pressed, the same as everyone else's. But the other cadets kept their distance, leaving a small gap around him. Even now, after everything that had happened, they still saw him as the human with the crippled runt. Krath stood near the front, his massive body impossible to miss. Crusher sat beside him, a mountain of muscle and teeth. Krath's tusks gleamed in the light. He looked like a warrior from an ancient legend, powerful and proud. The hall fell silent as Commander Varric stepped onto the central platform. Her dark green scales shone under the lights. Her yellow eyes swept across the assembled cadets. "This cycle has been one of the hardest in the history of the Academy," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "Many of you failed. Many of you quit. Those of you who remain have proven that you possess the basic requirements to serve the Coalition." She paused. "But there is a difference between meeting requirements and achieving excellence. Today, I will recognize those who have shown something more than strength, more than speed, more than cunning." Danny barely listened. He expected the top honors to go to Krath or Syleth, the Velith prodigy who had scored highest on every tactical examination. They deserved it. They had earned it. "The quality I speak of is rare," Commander Varric continued. "It cannot be taught. It cannot be bred. It is something that lives inside certain individuals. A fire that refuses to die no matter how hard the universe tries to put it out." Danny looked down at Scout. She was watching Commander Varric with her one good eye. Her ears perked forward. "This cycle, one cadet demonstrated this quality more clearly than any I have seen in my 30 years as an instructor." Varric turned her head and looked directly at Danny. "Cadet Danny Cole, step forward." The hall went silent. Every eye turned toward the human standing at the back. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Danny did not move at first. He was not sure he had heard correctly. Scout nudged his leg with her nose, and he started walking. The formation parted before him. Cadets stepped aside, some with confusion on their faces, others with disbelief. Danny walked past Krath, whose 4 arms had fallen to his sides. The Torvaki's expression was blank, with shock. Danny stopped in front of the platform. Scout sat beside him, her scarred body, small but straight. Commander Varric looked down at him. "During the Crucible, I witnessed something I have never seen before," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I watched a cadet face the destruction of everything he loved. I watched the simulation try to break his mind, his heart, his spirit." She paused. "And I watched him sit down, hold his wounded companion, and refuse to let despair defeat him. He spoke about his family with love instead of grief. He accepted the worst possibility and chose to keep moving forward." She turned to address the entire hall. "This is what humans call resilience. It is not the same as strength. A strong being can be broken by enough force. Resilience is different. It is the ability to bend without breaking, to fall and rise again, to find light in the deepest darkness." The dignitaries on the elevated platforms leaned forward, their attention fixed on the small human and his scarred pup. "Humans are not the fastest species in the galaxy," Varric said. "They are not the strongest. They are not the most intelligent or the most cunning. But they possess something that few other species understand." She looked at Danny. "They endure. They adapt. And they form bonds that others dismiss as weakness, but which are, in truth, their greatest strength." Danny felt his heart pounding in his chest. Scout pressed closer to his leg, and he reached down to touch her head. "For demonstrating exceptional resilience, tactical adaptability, and the courage to succeed with a companion that everyone else considered worthless, I award Cadet Danny Cole the rank of First Warden." The hall erupted in noise. Some cadets cheered, others shouted in protest. The dignitaries spoke rapidly among themselves, their voices a buzz of different languages. Danny stood still. He did not know what to say. He had come to the Academy hoping simply to survive. He had never imagined this. Commander Varric stepped down from the platform and stopped in front of him. She extended her clawed hand. "Well done, Warden," she said quietly. Danny shook her hand. Her grip was strong enough to crush bone, but she held it gently. "Thank you, Commander." She released his hand and returned to the platform to continue the ceremony. Other awards were given. Other cadets were recognized. But the energy in the hall had changed. Something had shifted. After the ceremony ended, Danny walked toward the exit with Scout at his side. The other cadets watched him pass. Some nodded with respect. Others simply stared. Krath stepped into his path. The massive Torvaki looked down at Danny. His forearms were crossed. Crusher stood behind him, red eyes glowing. "You got lucky," Krath said. "That is all." Danny looked up at him. He thought about all the insults, all the mockery, all the times Krath had called him weak and worthless. "Maybe," Danny said. "But luck is just another word for being ready when the moment comes." Krath's eyes narrowed. He looked at Scout, who sat calmly beside Danny's leg. "That creature is still a runt," he said. Danny smiled. "She is my runt." Scout's tail wagged once. Krath stared at Danny for a long moment. Then, slowly, something changed in his expression. It was not respect, not exactly. But it was no longer contempt. He stepped aside and let Danny pass. Danny walked out of the great hall and into the corridor beyond. The stars of the galaxy shone through the windows, bright and endless. Somewhere out there, dangers waited. Adventures called. A universe of possibilities stretched before him. Scout limped beside him, her pale fur catching the light, her one good eye looking ahead. In the observation gallery above the great hall, Commander Varix stood alone. She watched the human and his scarred companion walk away, their shadows stretching long behind them. She made a note in her personal log, her clawed fingers moving across the datapad. Subject: Danny Cole. Rank: First Warden. Assessment: the galaxy has not yet seen what humans are capable of. This one will prove it. Watch him closely. She looked up at the stars. Watch them all. The doors closed behind Danny and Scout. Their footsteps faded into silence, but their story was just beginning.